This is Arab Talk with Jess and Jamal, and I'm Jess Jamal.
And this is Jamal Dajani.
Jamal, we have a lot to talk about today, from the government shutdown to Palestine and Martin Luther King. But first of all, we want to send out our kind of deep kind of appreciation and and at the same time kind of absolute disgust at the 800,000 government workers who are going on their second month without a paycheck. I really want to encourage all of us to kind of take a step back and fathom and understand what it would be like not to be paid for more than a month, and how many of us have to live paycheck to paycheck. And we have 800,000 individuals, Americans, as well as however millions of people that is, because those are just the individuals, not even the families of people who are being held hostage by the President of the United States to build whatever he wants to build. I mean, this has gone from the absurd to the outrageous to the disgraceful. And, I can't even believe that the solution that the Trump administration has, Jamal, this is what Wilbur Ross said, the Secretary of Commerce. He said that people should take out a loan in order to survive not being paid by the U.S. government. That's really what this administration has come down to in terms of their solution to holding 800,000 people and millions of people hostage by this shutdown.
Well, I mean, let's take it back a little bit, because now you're right. All of the 800,000 plus federal employees will be missing their second check.
No, third check now.
Third check.
They've missed two now, and they're going to go on their third missed check.
So without pay, they've been working, 800,000 of them. They're stuck in the middle between this whole issue mostly about the wall, about the $5.7 billion to build that wall. Well, if we go back and start discussing the history of what I call the wall of shame, because we have many walls of shame across the globe.
Absolutely.
We've seen what happened with the Berlin Wall. We know about Israel's apartheid wall. And there are other walls where people were locked in and where families were separated and so forth. We can discuss some of these walls. But now, this whole idea of the wall was a racist idea, Jess.
To begin with,
was an idea to appease to his base. If you go back, remember the chants, those racists, build that wall, and then Trump will scream and say, and who's going to pay for the wall? And everyone will shout, Mexico. And Mexico, they're going to build that beautiful wall, and they're going to love it. I'm not making up these stories. And because people are now, or the media is explaining this political, chess game, as they are describing it, about the wall,
right,
without discussing the history behind it. It's not because the Democrats or Nancy Pelosi don't want to give him the money for security or to build that wall. It's because he made a stupid promise, a racist promise, for no reason, making up stories about security, about all these immigrants who are going to come into this country, rape your women, kill your children, kidnap people.
Bring drugs.
And that's why we need this emergency, because he made it, as they always talk about, a crisis. We have a crisis. So since he made that promise to his core base about the wall, and then, of course, Nancy Pelosi came into power after the midterm elections, and he was used to having people roll over, actually, when he said, I want to do this and that. And someone, for a change, said to him, no, we're not going to write that check for that stupid wall.
Well, actually, even when the House was still under Paul Ryan's control, and he had full control of the House, the Senate, and the executive branch, control of all three branches, the two major legislative branches of power, he was not able to get the funding for the wall. There's certainly relatively large numbers of Republicans, and not just Democrats, Jamal, who believe that this wall is a complete farce. And if we just look at some very simple facts, he says that terrorists are going to come from the Mexico border. But yet when you go to the DHS website and you look at statistics, where do people who are on the terrorist watch list or so-called suspected terrorists come from? They come from airport points of entry. Less than a couple of hundred in the last year were suspected who came from the points of border or who came from Mexico. Second, the kind of drug infestation that Trump is speaking about. Do you know that most of the illegal drugs that come into this country, number one, come from China? Number two, they come through the U.S. Postal Service. They're mailed. Fentanyl is mailed from China and brought to the United States.
Or driven through points of entry.
Driven through points of entry, or it's come through, through smuggling from boats. Or from Canada. You actually have more people coming to this country illegally from the Canadian border than you have from the border that we have with Mexico. So if you just want to look at the facts on its face, not even look at the political analysis of it, the facts on its face suggest that maybe we should build a wall with Canada and maybe not even with Mexico.
Look, early in the government shutdown, Speaker Nancy Pelosi called the wall immoral. And it is right. This is what it is. It's an immoral idea. And the wall has been a symbol of exclusion. And the wall has been, just like the MAGA hats now, how people see the MAGA hats and people wonder why they get worked over when they see someone wearing a MAGA hat. They think when you talk about the symbol of exclusion, we're going to stop the Mexicans from coming here. They are the rapists. They are the drug dealers and so forth. It's a symbol of racism.
Well, I want to go a step further, Jamal. Actually, I believe that the MAGA hat is the new KKK hat. It's just as the Ku Klux Klan wore a head cover to hide, and identify. So it did two things. It identified kind of this racist, hateful ideology, but also masked them. The MAGA hat has become the new cover, the new KK cover. Because when you wear the MAGA hat, you're not just doing it for fun. It becomes a symbol. It identifies you. It carries with it the full weight and symbolic power of what this administration represents, which is exclusion, division, racism, and things of that nature. That's why when these kids from this Catholic high school in Kentucky were facing off with these two Native Indigenous individuals at the Lincoln Memorial, staring down this Native Indigenous individual, Mr. Phillips, from this young kid, Sandman, who was wearing a MAGA hat, for him to say that he came, peaceful and wanted to discuss things and was interested in kind of protecting this Native Indigenous individual, no one buys it, Jamal. No one buys it. You wear a MAGA hat and you go face to face with an individual. That is not a sign of respect.
Of course.
That's a sign of disrespect.
Of course.
And that's kind of where we're at right now. The MAGA hat has become the new head covering.
So I want to talk a little bit about back to the wall and some facts about the wall and to clarify some of these misconceptions.
Yeah, let's do that.
Right. So, and again, this is Trump's wall of shame that we are talking about. So, fact number one of those facts, Jess, and people don't know, that before Trump took office, there were 654 miles or about 1,000 kilometers of barrier along the southern border between the United States and Mexico, right?
Yeah.
And since he took office, Trump built nothing. So every single president, they put some money into fixing some of those barriers
Yeah.
where they felt that certain areas on that border needed some reinforcement without the whole idea of having a wall, because we have areas just where it's impossible to cross natural barriers, rivers, mountains, valleys, and so forth. So Trump, basically, it's just a slogan for him for the past 2 years, and even with the GOP, with the Republicans in control of the House, both the Senate and Congress, he basically did not put a penny or any energy in building that wall. That's fact number one. Fact number two, no one really knows how much the wall is going to cost.
That's right.
So this figure, he's asking for $5.7 billion. And so you're getting, I've been looking at different allocations and estimates of people talking about how much it's going to cost. No one really knows the number. It puts the number, it has different ranges. I've seen estimates from $12 billion to $70 billion.
Well, yeah. If you wanna build the full length, it's going to be up to 70 billion.
This is what he wants. So this figure, where did he pull this figure out of a hat? $5.7 billion, which really will build a very short distance in the wall. So according to the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, the CPB, they said on an average it costs approximately $6.5 million per mile to construct a new wall or replace existing legacy fence. So do the math. That's why you come up with the $70 million. So the $5.7 billion, basically it's not going to do anything.
Yeah, but Jamal, you said 70 million. It's 70 billion.
$70 billion.
With a B.
Yeah, with a B. So it's between the 12 billion, that is the lowest estimate, to 70 billion. So, okay, then another fact which now many people know about, that when Trump was shouting and screaming, build that wall, and Mexico is going to pay for that wall, he was talking about a solid, according to him, beautiful concrete wall. Now he's talking about a steel, basically, barrier. So his story
keeps changing.
It has changed. He was talking about a concrete wall. On October of 2017, when the Trump administration revealed its plan, it showed different models, 8 actually, like different, I guess, models of this particular wall. 30-foot tall wall, concrete prototypes.
Right.
That's what they were showing. So, and he, by the way, he was describing, that's going to be a beautiful, concrete wall, and he has built many buildings, so that should be a walk in the parks, a piece of cake to build that. Now he's talking about a steel one, and he's talking about it, now he's describing it as totally effective while at the same time beautiful. So this is how his story has changed.
Well, let's not forget, Jamal, he's also saying, build the wall and crime will fall.
Well, I'll get to that. Build the wall and crime will fall. That's fact number 4.
Well, it's
so the other thing, where they keep saying that this is a crisis and all these immigrants are going to come here. The caravan, we don't hear, by the way, that much about those caravans.
No.
They somehow dissipated, they evaporated in thin air. We don't hear about that.
No.
So he was making such like a big crisis that the caravan was going to reach the border, and we're going to have thousands and thousands of people trying to cross. The number, that's fact number 4, the number of apprehensions at our southern border has declined over time.
Significantly.
So you have stats, actually. Stats going back all the way, Jess, from the year 2000 to the year end of year 2018. Do you know that in the year 2000, total number of migrants, this is according to the Border Patrol, we had 1.6 million, basically, apprehensions. And an apprehension doesn't mean they put them all in jail, but they hold them and then they send them back. So we had 1.6. The number in when Trump came into office, this is after the Obama administration, because remember, Obama earned the nickname as the chief deporter, basically, because he was deporting people. Under the Obama administration, they've had less than 400,000 apprehensions. And under actually the Obama administration, the figure dropped to about 378,000. And then in 2018, it went up under Trump, went up to 400,000. But this is a big difference from 1.6 million. So that crisis, he and his administration manufactured a crisis that actually has been on the decline. From 1.6 million to 400,000, Jess.
But I think that's a couple of things about that, Jamal. First of all, facts do matter. And so, obviously the biggest important point here is that everything that's coming from the Trump administration is a fiction, is a made-up fact, is not based on reality. And the idea of a crisis at the border clearly does not exist. And if there is a crisis, it's clearly not on the southern border. But the political cost and the human cost to this manufactured crisis has gone from just, what was already inconceivable, basically separating children from their parents, because that's really the plan of the Trump administration and DHS under Kristen Nielsen, is to, this family separation policy because it's a crisis. So they did damage to these families and to these children under the guise of a fake crisis. Now they've upped the ante, Jamal. Now the ante is not only are we going to tear families apart who are trying to escape horrific violence in Central America, in Guatemala and El Salvador and other places, but now they're holding 800,000 workers and their families hostage to the point that people are losing their homes. They're going to lose their health insurance. They're not going to be able to pay their mortgages. We're talking about, and the people who are supposed to be protecting us from these so-called terrorists have been working now for over a month. TSA agents have been working a month without being paid. Do you feel safer now?
No, absolutely not. But this brings me this is a segue to facts number 5 and 6, because the arrests now that we've been having on the border, they're mostly asylum seekers.
Yeah.
So the number of migrants trying to cross has dropped from 1.6 million to 400,000. But the number of asylum seekers have gone up. So we're not talking about criminals. We're talking about people running away
from violence
and seeking asylum. So the number actually have gone up by 43% as far as the asylum seekers. Furthermore, which is fact number 6, which most people don't know that, most illegal immigration is from visa overstayers.
Right.
Not people crossing the border.
Right.
Most of the undocumented or illegal, so-called illegal immigrants in this country, people who have overstayed their visa, they came to this country legally, either on a tourist visa or on a student visa.
Or a work visa.
And it ran out, and they remain in this country. And most of them, they flew into this country. They did not come on foot. They did not cross the Rio Grande, Jess. They came by airplane into this country.
And a lot of them, frankly, came from Europe. Let's be honest.
All over.
Yeah.
So when they talk about the large number, and this is when now Trump is trying to also negotiate with the youngsters who were who grew up in this country, now they became part of the equation, right? All these people, their families, they came here legally and they overstayed. Fact number 7, the wall is, and this is by all experts, including those who work in Homeland Security, the Drug Enforcement Agency, the DEA, the war is unlikely to stop the basically drugs coming from this country.
Of course.
Nationwide, Jess, heroin seizures reached 7,970 kilograms in 2017, 39% seized at the U.S.-Mexico border. The rest, like you said, they came through other means. People flying with the heroin, mailing heroin, people driving, but definitely they weren't coming, by means of a caravan or on foot to this country.
No.
So these are the 7 facts I wanted to talk about.
No, and I think, listen, Jamal, I think those facts are really important. And I think it's about time that these facts were not just articulated and spoken about so that everybody can be informed about them, but need to be placed in this political context. And the political context is that Trump has boxed himself in a corner. He is in a corner by his own doing. He is the one, and you had the quotes that he had from the campaign trail, day after day after day, saying that he would build the wall and that Mexico would pay. He's got nothing else to give to his base right now, Jamal. There's nothing else. He has to deliver this or nothing is going to happen. And unfortunately, what has happened is that he has used the shutdown of the U.S. government as his last bargaining tool. He's got nothing else. Now, we have been critical of Nancy Pelosi a lot on this show, justifiably, because of her lack of moral stance on a lot of very progressive issues. But my hat today is tipped to Nancy Pelosi for maneuvering politically one of the most amazing political moves, I think, in recent memory, Jamal, we can't say the word, the words that I really want to say, on air, but basically slapping Donald Trump and putting him in his place. He's got nothing. Right now, Trump's approval ratings are at the lowest they've ever been. They're about, depending on which poll you look at, they're between 32 to 34 to 36%. So this is, the entire. So even among his base, he's gone down dramatically. He's got only one option, Jamal. He only can either open the government or keep it closed, both of which are lose-lose for him politically.
And he's not doing the right thing because basically, what crime did the 800,000 federal employee commit to receive such a punishment?
They committed the crime of being hardworking individuals.
And
that's the crime.
And this is, and Trump wanted to negotiate. In fact, he is getting most of the funding, even though everyone knows that this is a joke. As I've explained earlier, the war to build that wall he needs $70 billion
minimum.
So the Democrats were willing to put that money on the table, maybe even more, just to have it for security enhancement. In other words, for the Department of Homeland Security. It's not, in some places might need a wall, some places might need more electronic devices and so forth. And he refused this because he made that promise. And you know why? Because he listens to Ann Coulter and he listens to Rush Limbaugh and those people to the far right. Now, he put himself between a rock and a hard place because he knows, they told him, if he stops talking about the wall, if he doesn't show that he wants something, he's going to lose the 2020 elections. And so he's sacrificing the 800,000 people, which, by the way, they've been playing games. They've learned. I guess he learned this from his friend Benjamin Netanyahu, or maybe an advice from Jared Kushner on how to repackage the wall. They started talking about the wall, and they know that this doesn't sit well with many Americans, with the millions of Americans here, so they changed their story.
It's a barrier.
It's a barrier. Well, who used that terminology? Israel. When Israel put that ugly apartheid wall,
they called it a barrier.
And they started saying first, oh, it's a barrier. Then later on, it's a fence. It's a separation fence.
No, it's a security fence.
How beautiful. You have a white picket fence between you and your neighbors. So it's this ugly 30-foot high concrete wall, which basically that was the model he was getting Israeli companies bidding, and they were providing him with plans for that wall. Now he says, no, it's going to be a steel see-through barrier. So there, and then most recently, if you listen to the language, an interview that Kellyanne Conway had with a CNN reporter, her name is Abby Phillip, when she was asked about the wall, what did she say? She didn't want to hear her talking about the wall. I'm not making this up. This is after Trump has been saying build that wall. She said, well, you don't keep saying that wall. It's not a wall, rather than it is steel slat barriers. She corrected her. So they're trying to kind of veer away from using that wall.
It sounds like they're using the Israeli technique, Jamal, of changing the words but not the reality. I have news for President Trump. There will be no wall. It will not get built. He is backed into a lose-lose corner, because if he opens up the government and starts negotiating without the wall, he will lose the 2020 election for sure, and his base. And if he doesn't open the government, it's going to cause a catastrophic failure of many aspects of our civil society. Jamal, the FBI, their FBI Agent Association came out and said, because FBI agents are not getting paid, and the FBI is really on the forefront in the so-called war on terror. So FBI agents doing surveillance, FBI agents making sure that this country are safe, they're saying that the security of the United States is in jeopardy as we speak, because FBI agents are not getting paid. They can make more money in the private sector. We're going to lose these agents. The FBI is not able to function. TSA agents are now talking about, Jamal, going on a nationwide strike. And if that happens, all airports close. So in the name of security, which is why Trump and Netanyahu are talking about building these walls, they're actually making safety and security for everyday Americans. They're making it unsafe for all of us. So my question to you, Jamal, Trump is a lose-lose situation. What do you think's going to happen? We're going on now past a month of this shutdown. Is he going to keep it shut down? What's he going to do?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, because he's not a rational person, that he will keep it, listen to his daughter-in-law recently when she asked about these people who weren't getting paid. What did she say?
This is Laura Trump.
This is Laura Trump. What did she say?
She basically said, take one for the team.
Yeah.
She said basically to the workers.
And that's why people were going crazy. It's kind of, they were comparing her to Marie Antoinette, which actually Marie Antoinette never said this. Let them eat cake. Here is someone who lives, lavishly. She can say, well, take it for the teens, like the president is doing the right thing. So what if they don't get their paychecks for a month or two because he's doing the right thing? So I feel at some point we are going to reach the breaking point, because
but
the breaking point.
What's the breaking point, though?
I tell you what's sadly, and it's going to be. I hope it doesn't get to that point, because I do appreciate the hard-working men and women in the federal government, people who are working in the TSA, Department of Homeland Security, the Coast Guard, etc., working without pay. But we are now hearing stories, and you know that this is not a big secret. Some of them are going and driving Uber. Some of them are having second and third jobs. And then even with all good intentions, when they want to do their work right, and they haven't gone, like the easy way to do is to just walk out and go on strike. They haven't done so. That's why we are still functioning. But if you listen to all the analysts, and I've listened this morning to the former, I think, FAA director, and he's saying, we have great men and women doing their work, like the air traffic controllers. But, this is a highly sensitive highly sensitive positions where you need all your faculties around, because these people work 10 hours a day. If they come to work tired, or they're thinking about things like, how am I going to pay for my, the tuition of my kids or my mortgage, and they are distracted, accidents could happen.
Absolutely.
So I hope he doesn't push us to this level where we're going to see him, and I hold Donald Trump responsible and the people who are supporting him for the lives of Americans who are going to get affected should something, God forbid, happens,
But Jamal,
and this is when you're going to see a total collapse, when people are going to walk into the streets demanding that they open that government.
I actually have a pretty awful theory, and I'm going to share it with you. It's a terrible theory, and I really hope that I'm wrong. But unfortunately, I actually think that part of Trump's inner circle, which is Kushner, himself, the new chief of staff, I actually believe that secretly they're hoping that something bad does happen. That it's kind of this idea that if there is a terrorist incident or a mass casualty event, what will happen, just like happened, after 9/11, it will marshal and galvanize universal support from everybody. He'll declare a national emergency and be able to not only build his wall, but also take control over all of the levers of government, because his next trump card, so to speak,
dictatorship,
is declaring a national emergency, Jamal, and taking the levers of power and control. And the United States right now is very vulnerable to this transition. I absolutely hope that I'm wrong. But
I hope you're 100% wrong.
I hope I'm 200% wrong.
Because the scenario that you have painted is terrible.
It is terrible, but
it's a terrible scenario.
But this is the only.
I don't think we'll get to that point. I'm hoping we don't get to that point. I'm also hoping that we don't have certain issues like issues that will affect the safety and security of a single citizen in the United States because of this crazy idea of shutting down the government and playing political games. You've been listening to Arab Talk on KPO San Francisco. This is 89.5 FM. We're going to shift gears right here. And I want to ask you, Jess, I'm going to talk about a little bit, because everyone has been talking about one thing recently, at least in our circle, the outstanding piece by Michelle Alexander in the New York Times. And the title, and yes, this was in the New York Times, by the way.
If you believe it.
If you believe it. The title was Time to Break the Silence About Palestine. And it's been freaking out a lot of people, and a lot of negative publicity and attacks on her persona and on the New York Times and their editorial board for allowing her the platform to speak freely about
let's
the conditions there.
Yeah, let's put it in context, Jamal. This Michelle Alexander is a scholar who's written incredible books about the new Jim Crow. She's written books about mass incarceration. She is considered among people in the academy and in progressive circles among the most brightest, most articulate, progressive thinkers of our time. She's really an extraordinary person. So, her specialty is racism, mass incarceration, and Jim Crow. So she knows a little bit about apartheid. She knows a little bit about racism, and she knows a little bit about...
her book's title is The New Jim Crow, by the way.
The New Jim Crow, exactly. So she writes on the eve of Martin Luther King, birthday and holiday, and she gives this amazing analysis on the oppression that Palestine and Palestinians have been subjected to by the Israeli government, by the state of Israel. And she wonders out loud, how has it come to be that essentially the argument that, we've been making a very long time, when are we going to open our eyes, as a world community and as a people who believe in justice, to this deep injustice that has been perpetrated against the people of Palestine? It's an extraordinary opinion piece.
And she talks about, of course, the BDS movement.
She talks about BDS.
The BDS. And let me just read a little summary or how she actually summarized the growth of the boycott movement in the U.S. And this is what she wrote. Even in Congress, change is on the horizon. For the first time, two sitting members, Representatives Ilhan Omar, Democrat of Minnesota, and Rashida Tlaib, Democrat of Michigan, publicly support the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. In 2017, Representative Betty McCollum, Democrat of Minnesota, introduced a resolution to ensure that no U.S. military aid went to support Israel's juvenile military detention system. Israel regularly prosecutes Palestinian children detainees in the occupied territories in military court. So this is one section, one sentence that she wrote.
But she...
One paragraph, I should say.
Yeah, one aspect. It's really a brilliant op-ed, and it's a call to all people of conscience. It's a call to all people who believe in justice, that if you're going to be committed to justice, you have to be committed to justice for Palestine and for Palestinians. Now, Michelle Alexander is not Palestinian, Jamal. She's a scholar, she's an activist, she's African American, but she is not a partisan in a sense of being a Palestinian. She really is alluding to the fact that one of the most important speeches that Martin Luther King gave was actually 4 days before he was shot and killed. He gave a beautiful sermon at the National Church in D.C., and basically said this was in light of the Vietnam War and all the difficulties that were going on at the time, obviously in the 60s. And he said, our problem is basically not with the right, the people who are committed to war. Our problem in this country are progressives who have shut their eyes to the injustice against what's happening in Vietnam and the injustice that's happening home against African Americans. So in that tradition, Michelle Alexander is issuing a similar call saying, hey, everybody, you cannot close your eyes to this injustice, to what's happening in Palestine. It was, Jamal, like two things struck me. Nobody in the mainstream media picked this up.
Total
Silence.
neglect. They don't, for example, when you have a big piece that made a lot of waves and created a lot of attacks, the author will be invited to come on CNN, Fox News, to defend their views. They are basically trying to
isolate
her and totally ignore her.
But even on the progressive left, you're saying, Fox and CNN, but even on so-called progressive television like MSNBC, let's say, or things like that, total radio silence about Michelle Alexander. They have isolated her from this articulation. The second thing that we should talk about, of course, is that all the sycophants of Israel, like Alan Dershowitz and his ilk, are
attacking her
ad hominem.
Well, she's coming under tremendous attack, and that's why I'm actually wondering why the mainstream media is not talking about this because they
Because
don't
they'll
wanna
have
hear.
to give her. They'll have to give her a
Exactly.
voice.
And this is at a time. This is not the first African American voice who have been attacked. There is a pattern here. So we had Mark Lamont Hill,
Lamont Hill.
Angela Davis, and now her. This is 3 in a row within what 3-4 months
Yeah,
period.
basically 2 months.
Yeah, less than a quarter period, coming out and saying
Hello.
the right thing. Exactly. Hello, these people are suffering. Nothing, by the way, she has said nothing that is so unusual, that she had said nothing that cameras have not captured. Children coming under fire. Every single person who goes and visits the West Bank and Jerusalem, wherever, they can see apartheid in practice, Jim Crow rules. The Israeli government itself came with its own law, basically the nation law.
Well, it's a Jim Crow law.
It's a Jim Crow law, highly publicized. So these scholars, because they're all scholars, by the way, every single one of them is a scholar, Mark Lamont Hill, he's a professor. Angela Davis
Is
she's
a professor.
And then she's also a writer and a scholar.
No, she's actually a professor
And,
too.
so they're coming in, they're stating the obvious, and they're coming under tremendous attack, and they're not given a platform to defend themselves. And you're right, all these known, basically
So-called progressive avenues
avenues, but
have
I
shut
said,
her out.
yeah, and not only this, but all these people who pretend to be defenders of justice and wherever they're attacking her from, basically
But
the supporters of the Netanyahu regime, and I can't think about basically anything else that they are supporting apartheid. Most famously Alan Dershowitz. So he looks around and he finds now the Hill where he can publish an article calling it time to tell the truth about the Palestinian issue, which is a ridiculous.
It's disrespectful.
This is basically a rehashing of making the case for Israel, which was basically debunked. And so Alan Dershowitz, which by the way he should worry about other issues, his relationship with the porno king Epstein and his involvement there.
Right.
And I'm sure more things will come about that story. He's published an article, attacking the front page article of the Sunday Review. And he calls it, he begins his article by saying, the front page of the New York Times Sunday Review featured one of the most biased, poorly informed, and historically inaccurate columns about the conflict between Israel and Palestine ever published by a mainstream newspaper, written by Michelle Alexander. This is his opening statement.
Okay, well, let me just say a few things, Jamal. First of all, we have to really give credit where credit is due, and Michelle Alexander has taken on a formidable machine when it comes to the Israeli lobby, the pro-Israel lobby, the pro-Israel sycophants who will defend Israel's apartheid, oppressive occupation tactics under any circumstance. So she is an incredibly courageous individual. But when, as you said, you have Angela Davis, Mark Lamont Hill, and now Michelle Alexander all standing up for justice, my question to the so-called progressive elements of either the Democratic Party or people who call themselves progressive, why are you not defending Angela Davis, Michelle Alexander, and Mark Lamont Hill? Why have you left these
Fear.
Why have you left these courageous individuals to being attacked with so much vitriol by these hateful groups in support of these oppressive apartheid tactics, these pro-Israel tactics? I mean, Michelle Alexander should be not only celebrated for her courage, but she also needs our support right now. And we're hoping that people, because for the New York Times to write this, Jamal, it's a huge deal.
And also we should appreciate the editorial board at the New York Times for allowing her to publish this article.
Come on, Jamal. The New York Times has let the Palestinians.
I'm letting bygones be because as long as they show good intentions, which with this article, I think, I'm not going to talk about the past. I mean, there is definitely an imbalance. In fact, there was a recent research done on how many times articles are, or how many
over the last 50 years.
Over the last 50 years, pro-Palestinian versus pro-Israeli.
99-1.
It's the imbalance is so obvious, but we're moving forward here.
Well,
You're having outspoken people. She's getting the support from the community and people who understand this. But then again, you ask the question, and I go back to the politics of fear. And this is the sad reality about our mainstream media institutions. They are, succumbing to the politics of fear. Advertisers, people with influence and so forth, that for them to talk about justice, remember the terminology we use here, which is PEP, progressive except on Palestine.
Progressive except for Palestine.
They are PEPs because they are willing to talk about, and we have some time to discuss like the situation in Venezuela, but they are willing to talk about human rights everywhere
except Palestine.
Except not Palestine. So when you have a great article by someone, a great person like herself and a scholar, they just bury their heads in the sand and pretend it didn't happen.
Well, I think that's a good analysis, Jamal, and I actually think, though, and I said this to you before we went on air, but I am very apprehensive about saying that there are tipping points when it comes to Palestine, because we have been let down in terms of justice in Palestine so many hundreds, if not thousands of times, where the international community and the progressive community have let Palestinians down time and time again. So I don't want to be as extreme as saying that there is a tipping point per se, but I am willing to say that there are a lot of uncomfortable people in Tel Aviv, that there are a lot of uncomfortable people at AIPAC, and that there are a lot of uncomfortable pro-Israel, hacks and supporters who are now seeing some cracks in the wall.
Well, I call it cracks in the Hasbara, which is the
cracks in the Hasbara,
which is the Israeli propaganda and the AIPAC's propaganda in this country.
I think that they're seeing that, their time is going to be coming to an end.
So you think the tide is shifting?
I feel like something has shifted with Representative Omar, with Representative Tlaib, with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. By the way, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Rashida Tlaib are both on the Oversight Committee in the Congress, which is one of the most powerful, committees that you can be on, and they're freshman Congress people. They're both pro-Palestinian in a significant way. So I kind of think times are changing. And it's interesting, in Michelle Alexander's op-ed, she referenced lots of rabbis and Jewish groups who are support of Palestinian justice. So it looks like something has really shifted.
It has shifted. We have a few minutes left, and I want to talk about...
Yeah, we only have a few minutes. What do you got, Jamal?
The American interventionism. We're back to interfering.
In other people's business.
Not that we've stopped.
We never stopped.
With the situation in Venezuela. And I can only say, because we don't have too much time, but I've seen this scenario happening in the so-called Arab Spring. So for not that we're siding with this group versus that group in Venezuela.
No, but Venezuelans should decide for themselves.
Exactly. So when you have started with President Trump recognizing the opposition as the interim president, then Canada follows suit, and then other countries. This is crazy.
It is.
I mean, what business do we have? Is it oil? I mean, do we care about the Venezuelans who have been fleeing the country and trying to come to this country, and we're preventing them from coming into this country?
Exactly.
And all of a sudden now we are talking about, the support for the opposition. Haven't we seen this scenario in Libya, in trying to change regime in Iraq, and look what happened to the country and the destruction in Syria?
Same.
All these places. I mean, what business does the United States have in Venezuela?
So my statement to President Trump and Secretary of Pompeo is the same that I gave to Bush and Powell, which is, if you break it, you own it. And if you think you're going to intervene and things are going to go okay, you're most likely, given the U.S. history of interventionism, you're going to break it. And if you break it, you own it. And as is what's happening in Iraq, as what's happening in Afghanistan and in Syria and beyond, when you break something like that, you have unintended consequences, which you may have no control over. Let the people of Venezuela decide their own fate.
You're absolutely right. You've been listening to Arab Talk on KPOO San Francisco, 89.5 FM. Follow us on Facebook Live. This is Jamal Dajani 2. Also go to our website, arabtalkradio.com, where you can download our shows, you can listen to our podcasts, and of course you can listen to us live right here in San Francisco on KPO San Francisco. Also on their website, we stream on their website live, kpo.com.
We'll see you next week, and if you want to send us any comments, it's arabtalk@kpoo.com. We'll see you next week.